Hi Floss Tube, Susan Stanley here with Susan Stanley Stitch in Time. Welcome back to those of you who have followed me, and welcome to the new viewers. I'm glad you're here. I'm enjoying a gorgeous, beautiful sunny day with a cool breeze here in Seattle. I've got work to do in the yard, work to do around the house, and of course I want to get to some stitching. I want to share with you what I've been up to, and just hope you're all doing well. It's super fun to connect with everybody as always with your comments. I can't thank you enough. Again, always shout out to everyone who has sent me book recommendations, chart information, just connecting. It's just been wonderful. So thank you again, and I look forward to hearing from new folks. If you're following me, come for the first time, I hope you'll subscribe. It encourages me, lets me know that there are people out who are actually interested in what I'm talking about, because I do have a little bit of a unique bend, I guess, with the floss tubes. I incorporate my knowledge and my love of quilting and my interest in history, especially textile history and sewing notion history, and so I try to bring it all together with cross stitch. And I don't know, that's just how my world works. My brain loves to make connections, and I also love to make connections with you. So thank you again for being here, and let's get to it. This is my floss tube number 6, and I've entitled it Floss, Fabric, and Feathers. You'll find out why shortly. I have had a wonderful opportunity since I last filmed to participate in the Penn dry goods seminar that they hold every year. It's sponsored through the Schwenkfelder Library and Heritage Center. I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly, so forgive me if I did not. It's kind of a textile fiber arts historic workshop. And so some of the lectures and workshops I went to included purses and wallets from throughout the early centuries, what they meant, what they looked like, how they were used. Another one I attended was on Bristol samplers, which completely captivated me, and I plan to dive more into that realm. I did also watch a lecture from someone in New Jersey, and I'll share. I purchased her book, so I'll share that at the end during haul. But anyway, if you're interested, I suggest looking it up online. It's got a little bit of quilt stuff. It's got fiber art, early fiber arts things, notions, kind of everything that I love, samplers. And I could attend for such a reasonable fee because it was all on Zoom. I didn't have to travel. I hope they do that in the future. It sure made it great. I know there's nothing like being together though, so I completely understand, but it might be nice if they could offer both options. Like I said, I love getting your comments. I love hearing your stories. I have a couple funny stories to share. Well, I have stories that I'll share periodically, but this one came from someone this last time. Her name is Lindy, and she said I could share this with you. Lindy lives in Michigan, and Lindy said that she had an amazing conversation today, which was back the end of May, and she wanted to share. She said, 3 quilt friends and I met for the first time since December 2019. We meet monthly and go from the local quilt shop here in Holland to a Chinese restaurant across the street for lunch. Today we had a young man wait on us. With very few people to wait on, he was very conversational. Asked if we were friends or family. We explained we were longtime friends and quilters. Well, with English as his second language, he had fun trying to figure all this out. Part of the explanation of what a quilt is was fabric cut up in little pieces and sewn back together in patterns, and somehow that struck a chord with him. He shared a story we'd never heard of, and perhaps you have, but I hadn't, so I'm sharing it with you. Good Wishes Quilts, a Chinese tradition to welcome a new life. When a child is born, friends and family bring a small piece of fabric to the family, and the pieces are joined in a blanket, a quilt. Sure enough, I just Googled it. Each piece represents a good wish for the new child's life. I am a lover of tradition and heritage, and needless to say, this story touched my heart, and she offered to share a book with me. I ended up being able to purchase it, so she didn't have to ship it back and forth, but that story struck a chord with me too. It actually made me tearful because I am just always continually amazed at how fiber, threads, fabric connect us as humans. And we have our stitch groups, we have our friends, we have our sewing circles, if you're fortunate enough to live somewhere that you can have that. And it connects us to the past, it connects us to what's happening now, and it also leaves a message to the future. And I think that was a wonderful story. Maybe we need to swap threads with our friends for our projects, for our cross-stitch projects, so we can say that, you know, this little bird was used with my friend. I don't know. Anyway, thank you, Lindy. That was a lovely, lovely story. And as I get fun stories like that, I'll try to share them with you over time. Well, let me show you what I've been working on. The first thing I want to share with you is my project from the Maggie Bononomy workshop that I took on Mackinac Island. And there is a wool sew along going on with Log Cabin Quilter and Crimson Greenway. And I didn't do this with that in mind because I'd already signed up for this workshop, but it all is happening at the same time. And I thought, well, okay, I'm going to be a part of that. But if you want to and are interested, you should check out Log Cabin Quilter and Crimson Greenway, the program that the sew along that they're offering, and I'll put their information below. One of the wool designers whose name you'll hear a lot, and I believe Carol Saltbox Stitcher did a tutorial on her technique, and that's Maggie Bononomy. And so Maggie was my instructor for my time at the Needlework Seminar on Mackinac Island. And one of the projects was a needle book. It's made using gorgeous, gorgeous linen from Blackberry Primitives. And all that information is in my last video, video number 5. And the wool is also from Blackberry Primitives. Maggie included antique buttons for us to use and some old ticking. The inside, this pin pillow is lovely, luscious velvet, hand dyed by Blackberry Primitives, and then a pocket for keeping scissors, glasses, whatever. Anyway, I'm really, really pleased with how it turned out. I had to do a traditional quilt binding around the edge. It's just in me. She had a different finish, but anyway, that was the only thing I changed. And then the second project I did, and it took me quite some time after I got home to finish it, was this table runner called Escape to the Island. She designed just for the workshop. And what was really fun about this piece is it was layered. She thought in 3 days, you know, we wouldn't have enough to do. It took me probably another week to finish this when I got home. But this project is done in layers, like I was saying. She's included antique fabric, linen, wool, some textured kind of canvas, and she had us make a 9 patch by hand and then applique and quilt it on to the background linen. And these are just ideas you can always adapt to your project. She had us sew this gray patch on with other patches. We had a wool strip here down the center that we stitched on, and then we started building the motifs, the flower pot. The sailboat, the bottom of the boat is actually a piece of fabric off of an old quilt. I don't know if you can still see the stitching lines, and the sail is also a piece of antique fabric. The dragonfly has wings that are made out of some antique shirting fabric off of an old quilt. This is just a really fun, relaxing way to stitch if you just feel like you need your needle in your hand, but you don't want to count or be fussy with applique. This is just wonderful, and I'm going to leave it to those other ladies, if you're new to this, to explain all the ins and outs of wool applique and working with wool and kind of primitive fiber arts. I didn't fully finish it because I have an idea, and I think I just yesterday received all the supplies I need to fully finish it. I'm not going to make a table runner. I have another idea in mind, and I will share it with you next time we meet. So hopefully it comes together as I'm envisioning in my mind. The next set of whips I want to show you are my cross stitch whips, and I am actually getting a little bit of progress. Everything takes time, and I was so encouraged when Carol, I think she said, I could be misquoting her, and forgive me if I am. I think she said that a lot of the samplers that are behind her in her videos she did within the last 10 years. And that gave me great hope, because I probably have 10 years worth of samplers started. I hope I do finish them. All right, so the one I'm doing for the Blackbird sew along is Florence Navidad. I really love this chart, and I especially love the antique on the back, and I might actually change and chart and put the girl's name in. I might bump up the colors a tiny bit, make the red a little bolder, although they're pretty true. I get myself into trouble messing around with things, but this is being stitched on 35 count lamb's wool. I'll show you my progress. It's just a little bit. I had to do a lot of unpicking of, we call it unpicking and stitching, a lot of frogging of the basket. I don't know why I was just having such a hard time getting the one side counting. And the threads I'm using are Weeks Dye Works. And I think some people are finished with this and some people are working on it, but it's so pretty. The colors are so soft. I'm covering up all the stitching. I'm not sure if the lighting's super good. I tried filming last night and it was just way too dark, but I don't know if today's much better. Anyway, I'm really pleased with this. I'm really enjoying this linen. It's got a lot of body and seems to work for me. I'm a very heavy-handed stitcher. That means I pull things too tight. I think I get my stress out in my stitching. So, all right, the next whip I have is One Nation. Oh my goodness, I've seen so many finishes of this on StitchCon this week. It's just really excited me. This I found out about from Lancashire Stitcher, and I think I mentioned it before, but I was drawn to the chart because each stripe has a state and they're in order of their acceptance into the Union, and there's a sheet in the chart that has the date that each state was accepted into the Union. You know, I'm a history nerd. I can't of it. So this one, I am stitching on Legacy Linen Parisian Gray, and she's a little big. It took me so much time to count those 400 stitches across. And I know for those of you who've stitched a lot, that's probably nothing, but my eyes were crossing. I would count 100 and mark it, 100, mark it. Then I started counting 10 and marking it. I think it's right. I don't know. It is what it is. So since I doubt myself, I decided I'm going to go up the side and block off the stripes, and then go across for the stripes that go all the way. These ones. And then when I get here, I'm going to count till I get to there and stop and just kind of get the outline so I can get this outline in and work on some stars and some words and motifs and kind of go back and forth, because I think I would be really pushing myself to do all the stars at once. That's my plan anyway. So this, I don't know, I get these wild ideas, but I thought, well, I want to distress it a little bit. I want to make it look older. So I just, before I started doing a lot of stitching, I started blotting it with some tea and coffee, and it's all going to get covered up, but you can see it a little bit. Then I stabbed myself when I was stitching and didn't realize it until I saw blotches. I was bleeding all over the linen. So I took the area that I had bled all over it, sorry, that was kind of gross, and rinsed it. And then I noticed that the flosses that I'm using are not color fast, some of them. I'm using Classic Colorworks Cupid. One strand of Cupid, one strand of DMC, 8/16. I'm using Michael's Navy by Weeks Dye Works. And I'm using one strand of Toasted Marshmallow and one strand of Shabby Sheep. And so that concerned me. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, and lo and behold, Jean Farish, if you haven't watched her, she's so informative. I love her YouTube videos. Jean Farish did recently, actually, Catherine, Stitching in Costume, mentioned it, and this was all happening and converging at the same time that I cut myself and almost ruined my project. Anyway, I watched Jean, and she's addressing the issue of the non-color fast threads, and it made me think. I was just storming along stitching as a quilter and as a sewer, you know, all my life. I mean, my mom, we'd come home from the fabric store and we'd throw the fabric right into the washing machine and wash it. That's just what you did. And if it was a color that was prone to bleeding or migrating, you would set it. Now, fabric back then was set with vinegar and salt and things like that. There are products, which I'll share at some point with you, that you can use to set fabric. And most quilters are aware of that, because you can even today have fabrics that will have excess dye and travel on your quilt, and you don't want that. So I wondered, you know, would this work the same for floss? Now, you should watch Jean's video. I think it's number 15, because she does some great experiments trying to figure this out too. And I'm going to try using some of the quilt fabric dye set products on the floss. I'm just, you know, and see what happens, because that concerned me, because I do stitch in hand, and I want to be able to rinse this out when I'm done. I mean, I always wash my quilts when they're done because I've handled them so much. So, and of course you're going to use a quilt differently than you would a sampler. So these are things if you have any information, I'm sure everyone has their way of doing it. I'd love to know. I'm still gathering information on that, and I'll let you know what I find out. All right, next thing, pardon me, next thing I was working on this time is my Julia L. Fuchs, and I've talked about this probably several times, and you probably maybe. This chart is still available, I believe, through Needlework Press. This was something that popped up at the beginning of the year, and the proceeds from the sale of this chart were going to a charity. I'm so sorry, I can't remember what it was, but I loved it and I bought it. I mean, I'm just drawn to simple marking samplers, and of course she put the antique on the cover, so I had to buy it because I'm stitching this on 36 count Seraphim butternut, and I did get the fabric and floss from the attic. It's showing up really orange. Yeah, it's not quite that orange. With Dinky Dye's Rose Bay, and I was stitching 1/2, and I decided to go with 2/2, so I had to buy more floss. I just liked the bold. It just looked like the chunkiness of wool. Some of the early, you know, some of my antique samplers are stitched in wool, and I just kind of have become accustomed to that, so I liked it, so I wanted to keep that going. My next stitch, we learn from our mistakes, and I hope you'll learn from my mistakes. I'm still, I mean, every project is a learning experience, and every quilt I've ever made, I learned something, and I think, well, I should have done this differently. I'm usually, for the most part, happy with the results, but sometimes I think, wow, I really missed the mark, and hopefully I catch that before I get too far into the project. Or I just say, you know what, that probably could have been better, but it still works. So I think that's the case with this one, the choices that I've made. Anyway, I'm doing the SAL So Long with Raspberry-Stitcher on Jessie Watson. It's a stitch along in honor of Autism Awareness. And if you're interested in joining or have some interest in learning about autism, you can check out Raspberry Stitcher's posts on it. If you do participate, she organizes chats where we can all sit and stitch together, and it's so fun. There are people in Australia participating, and it's just great, a way to connect. So my concern with my choice on this is my linen that I picked. I think I was just trying to make it look old and antique, and I wanted to try something different. I wanted to try one of the overdyes, and so I purchased, and there's nothing wrong with the fabric, it's great. It's To Die For Fabrics, and it's River Stone is the linen, and I'm just going to show you the linen by itself. I just thought it was really, it's kind of showing up green there, but it's not really green. So unfortunately, a lot of the flosses, and I'm either going to switch the linen and start over, or I'm going to switch a few of the flosses. But there's a couple flosses that just melt right into that. That's what I have so far. So I'm not too far into it to make a left turn and try something else. I may stitch a little bit more and see. It looks a little bit better in the daylight. I don't know. You know, when you're only that far into it and you're having hesitation, it's probably good to take some time and think it through before you proceed. I don't know. The joy of projects. The joy of going rogue. I should just follow the directions and it'll be it'll go much better for me. Anyway, I'll let you know what I decide and how I progress. My last whip is Ann Gott, and this is part of Attic Needleworks Stitch Along for the Year. I love this chart. I love everything about it. I love it. It's got lots of red. It's got that darker background. Just speaks to me. So now if I just stuck with one thing, I might have a lot more progress, but I'm not the only one. I can see that now. That has lots going on. So this is what I have so far. And I just enjoy it so much. There's a little more contrast than what you're seeing. I'm sorry, there's a little wrinkle. I tried filming, like I said, I tried filming this last night. It had everything laid out and pressed, and it just wasn't working. So this is straw. The linen is straw, and the flosses are Classic Colorworks. Again, not color fast. I'm a little worried, but maybe I shouldn't be. Even if I used a frame or a hoop, I still would want to rinse it, but I may not be able to rinse these. Anyway, of course, my favorite part is that red cow. I just love it. I'm doing 1/2. I love stitching 1/2. So that's what's going on there. All right. Now, my next whip has to do with the quilt that I talked to you about, I think in my first or second video, and that is a quilt that I'm reproducing. You know, if you've watched me, you know that I don't know, what makes my heart sing is to reproduce old samplers and really get to know the person who made the sampler, and old quilts, antique quilts that are from the past. They just fascinate me. So this quilt is in the American Folk Art Museum. And this is a picture of the quilt in the museum. It's just a ton of applique. And I love applique, I love handwork. So years ago, Threadbare in Australia reproduced the quilt. And that was their version. And that's pretty much what I'm using, but I am also pulling from Karen Mowry's book, A Bountiful Life. She also reproduced it. What I really liked about this book, this is her adaptation, she calls it, because some of the things are changed. She showed, in the foreword, she shows some of the templates that were left in the box when this quilt was brought to the museum that were never used. And so you can see that there is a gentleman and a few other shapes that were never used, and some that were. And so the quilt goes by the name Civil War Bride, it goes by the name Bird of Paradise, and it also goes by the name of Lost Boy. I'm planning to put my family, applique my family on the label on the back, the rest of my family, because I'll pop in a picture of what I've done so far. And so obviously I adapted the woman to look like me, and I'll make the, you know, I'm not too narcissistic, but I just thought that would be meaningful, trying to make it a little bit more representative of my family. So sorry to make that jiggle. All right, so this month I have been working on, and I was hoping to have it finished, the Bird of Paradise, or the Peacock block. One of them, there are two. And there are pieces on this block that are meant to overlap into the block next to it, so don't be alarmed if you see that this is right on the edge. It's meant to be. I prepared all the edges on this because I was going to travel with it. I took this to the Needleworks seminar and on Mackinac, and I didn't touch it, but I wanted all the edges prepared, and I basted it down. So I'm almost done. I have to put some embroidery eyes and some antenna on the butterfly. So you're gonna see this quilt for a long time. I'm sorry, but it's not a fast project. It'll probably take me 2 years to finish it, because the borders are gonna take a year probably, because I don't work on just one project. So I just thought, well, there's my research for this month. I gotta look into these peacocks, because they pop up in cross stitch, they pop up in quilts, they pop up in fabric, they pop up in coverlets, which are woven bed cloths or coverings, bed coverings. They just seem to be everywhere. And then as I started looking into it, they pop up in art from this earlier 1800s and even before time period. And they're of course in this quilt that I'm doing, which was made during like 1860 to 1864. That's why it's called Civil War Bride Quilt, because it was made during the war. They believe that possibly the groom died in battle or something. Anyway, it's not confirmed. So I thought, well, let me learn a little bit about these peacocks. So, I mean, I grew up in San Diego. I remember going to the San Diego Zoo as a child pretty regularly, and they always had male peacocks strutting around the grounds, and something would set them off, and they would explode with their beautiful fan of feathers. And so they are pretty striking. I mean, pretty spectacular birds. The best day at the zoo was if one of their feathers fell off. At that time, you could pick it up off the ground and keep it. That was the best day at the zoo. Anyway, so throughout history, I mean, the peacocks have been called one of the most beautiful birds in the world. They really are. I mean, there are birds, I could talk about birds forever, because there are birds represented in needle art. And in fact, I believe the Embroiderers Guild of America has a whole book on birds in needle art. I meant to check that out a little more. Anyway, peacocks in particular, though, symbolize good, and they also symbolize evil. And it depends on what time period that you're looking at them represented in art. And I would include that with needle art. They represent the resurrection, royalty, immorality, pride, and vanity. So they have a whole lot of meanings, and it really, like I said, depends on the time period that you're looking at them. The actual bird itself originated in India, and it is from the pheasant family. Okay, that helped me, because a lot of birds in fabric and needle art are pheasants. They look a lot like a peacock. I guess it's the comb on the top that helps you identify them. Anyway, and they're represented in folklore and folk tales. And so by the end of the 1800s in fabric, peacocks became really popular in the Western visual culture, and William Morris really took on peacocks in his imagery, if you want to do some research on that. They come from a fabric that I don't want to talk a ton about today, but I will at some point, called chintz. and which was based in India, this gorgeous chintz fabric. I don't own a piece of antique chintz with a peacock on it. I think I have a house instead. I think it's super, super expensive, but it's gorgeous, and I look at it, but I do have a piece that is from an antique piece, reproduced. I just have this one panel that someday I hope to use in a quilt or something. I don't know, but there you can see the peacock. There is another fabric I wanted to show you, and it's available now. And I know I have a lot of it, and I just couldn't put my fingers on it. If I do, I'll put a picture below. But I wanted to let you know about it because I think it'd be most gorgeous project bags. This is what it looks like. It is a fabric that was designed by Di Ford Hall for Andover. Di Ford is no longer with us. I think I mentioned that earlier as well in one of my earlier videos. And the fabric line is called Rochester. And I plan on making something. This comes in a blue and teal, kind of a tealy blue and olive color as well. Anyway, I plan to make something out of that fabric to hold some of my needlework projects. I said that peacocks were represented in coverlets. I have a chunk of coverlet that it's either a peacock or a pheasant, I'm not sure. But this is from the 1800s. That's the front, that's the back. I'm guessing it could be, I don't know. They look kind of similar unless you see those really striking tail feathers. Of course, like I said, they're represented in embroidery. I couldn't show pictures to you because most of the pictures in the books and on the internet that I found are copyrighted. So if you're interested in exploring that, I would recommend going for it. I did, however, find a couple quilts, and I won't show you a ton. This one is in Hidden Treasures from the Pooh's Collection. It was written by Lori Lee Triplett and Kay Triplett. They're kind of very well known in the antique textile world. But this one is a quilt called Lone Star with Cutout Chintz. And so that's the quilt, and then in each corner there is a peacock, very similar to the piece of fabric I showed you. So, and this quilt, interestingly enough, was made in 1845. So we're kind of in that time frame that this quilt I'm reproducing came about, because I'm always interested in what would draw somebody to use those images in their project. In a minute, I'm going to show you, I'm so sorry, I'm trying not to wiggle this. All right, and then another book that is fabulous if you're interested in chintz fabrics is Chintz Quilts, also by Lori Lee, Kay and Lori Lee Triplett and Xenia Cord. And then this is a peacock center medallion. And this just gives you an idea of what quilts looked like in the early 1800s. This one's from 1820. It's English. And then this is a close-up of the fabric. I think it's stunning. So then, of course, you know, I have to look into the cross stitch that has peacocks represented. And there's, you know, a fabulous book I know many of you already know about, Sampler Motifs and Symbolism. And in this book, the peacock represents basically everything that I've already shared with you. But in needlework, in sampler needlework, there may be a pair of peacocks, with one with a spread tail and the other one with the tail closed. If it has individual tail feathers in Dutch and Scottish samplers, but not in the German. So as I looked through samplers, I was so amazed that this peacock that kind of isn't a motif that stands out in my mind was represented almost everywhere. I found peacocks in black work, in Mexican samplers, Dutch, German, and I know that they were kind of used as a sign of nobility. A lot of nobles would keep them on their grounds. Why are these little girls stitching samplers with peacocks? Maybe it's the relationship that the peacock has to religious imagery, and a lot of their training was done by nuns or in religious schools. I don't know, but it's fascinating to me. So I had to dig up, I had to dig up a few charts that I have, and that have peacocks, of course. And this one is by Heartstring Samplery, and it's a free download. And I suggest you go to her website, Beth Twist, and she gives you the story of how she found this little piece of needlework with that peacock. Now, I would say that's one tail feather, so maybe that would help us identify. Maybe she's already identified where this guy came from, this little piece came from. But anyway, so I have a Stacy Nash pattern. It's not a reproduction of an old quilt, or an old cross-stitch needlework, but I love the way she represents peacocks. I just love it. It's called Peacock in the Pumpkin Patch Pin Keep, and try to say that 20 times fast. Anyway. All right, and this is also by Stacy Nash. This is an early primitive pattern. It's the Grace Bridges sampler. It's a pattern reproduced from an antique, a chart reproduced from an antique. And right there is a peacock with another just one tail feather. Now, I don't think it's a pheasant, but maybe I'm misrepresenting these guys. I don't know. He sure looks like a peacock to me. All right. Another chart that has a peacock that I dream about doing, and I guess I should just start, because if I only have 10 years of stitching left, I don't know, maybe I have 20, maybe I don't, who knows. Anyway, I'm not going to pronounce it because I will butcher it. I know I've seen a few people complete it. 1790, it's Dutch, and there in the corner, right there, and then over here is that little peacock. So he's just making his way all around the world, really. And then the last one I'll share with you, and there are so many. If you kind of find this interesting, you want to go research or look at charts with peacocks, oh my goodness, there's a ton. This ATS 1871 sampler from Saxony. Look at that guy right there with the big tail feather. So it kind of opened my eyes to an image on samplers that that wasn't what drew me in. It's usually like a house or the people, or it's other things, maybe the dogs or the cats, but now I'm going to definitely be looking for peacocks. If you want to have fun, look up antique sewing notions with peacocks. Just look it up and see what pops up. There are some amazing things that, like I said, I can't show you because they're copyrighted, but you can go look at online, and if you just have some spare change, you could bid on one or two of them. They're just gorgeous. All right, haul. I'm just noticing. Okay, well, that'll be interesting. Okay, so I think a lot of you are aware that Ellen with My Needle is hosting a sew-along in honor of her birthday that starts at the end of June, and it's on the Ellen Norris sampler. It's by GGR, and I got the chart. I'm still waiting on the silks, but I got the linen, and I just pulled the DMC just to see, because of my experience with that last one I showed you. I don't want to make a mistake where I'm not happy with the linen, so I just wanted to check the colors out. Penny Tucker is also participating, and she was so gracious to share her needlepoint silk conversion with me. And so I've ordered those, and they hopefully will get here in time. I was so excited the chart made it. So Penelope Tucker is on Instagram, and just a lovely friend I've met through this adventure of doing floss tube. So that is one thing that came. I also ordered this book by Rebecca Scott called Samplers. I'm sure a lot of you already have it. I haven't really been able to dive into it yet, but it's historical. It's British samplers, and it talks about the role of samplers in women's lives. Just like, what better reading is there out there, right? I downloaded Matilda Isabel Creasy by Whilst Iris Naps. I told her, who can't stitch a sampler with that funny hog, cow, beastie? I don't know what he is. She said she thought he was a cow, but I guess he could be. Whatever that little girl saw in cows. I would call that a primitive cow. I don't know. And then Rebecca from Hedgerow Stitching also had a new release, Eliza Hepton, 1863. It's a schoolgirl sampler. I just loved it. I love seeing the antique. I have enough charts now for the rest of my days. I don't need to order any more, but I still will. This one I have had my eyes on, and I just went for it. 30 Days Hath November. It's from the Scarlet Letter. And I found one I think is very similar in the neatest manner on page 36. I think this sampler looks an awful lot like it. So I'll do some more reading. I love making those connections. The book that Lindy recommended, Lindy, who I shared her story in the beginning, was a quilt book, All Flags Flying. It's patriotic quilts in from America, starting back in the early days of America. So this will just be a lot of fun for me. It goes through all the time periods. There's a gorgeous ship. And then from the Penn Dry Goods seminar lecture that I went to, or that I Zoomed to, Marty Campanelli has done some research on female education in New Jersey and special emphasis on needlework instruction. And this is all about the teachers of the young girls and how they would travel from town to town, how motifs traveled with them. Just such an interesting story. I wonder if any of their samplers had peacocks. I don't know, haven't looked. Okay, and then the last thing I got, of course I just loved the color, Sampler Stitching, a notebook of keeping track. So I've tried to keep a journal of my stitching day to day. This is kind of a finished stitch sheet. I'll probably have this cut and make it into a different format, or I can take a picture, maybe cut some of the threads and put in here, the linen. I don't know. I'm not sure, but I just bought it because I love the cover. And you could put stickers on it and make it a lot of fun too. All right, so last time I had a drawing and I used the random comment picker and I picked the winner. And I'm gonna bring that to you right now. Okay, so the winner of this drawing from last time, the quilt book and the blocks and the hanger, is Little Annie Z. And thank you so much for all of you who participated in that. And if you, Little Annie, if you would please message me through Instagram Messenger or my email, which is in my information below, and give me your address, I'll mail this out to you. Thank you again for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful few weeks of stitching, and I'll see you soon. Bye.